All right, this is John Gay, the managing editor here at the National Interest, and we wanted to try out Facebook's live feature and see, if we can get it to work here, because we've got a lot of cool people that write for us and that come through our office on a day-to-day basis, and I think we could potentially present some pretty interesting different viewpoints to you. So today, we've got our defense editor, Dave Majumdar, who's got a long experience reporting on national security issues, particularly aviation. And we wanted to talk today about a recent article that he had on a readiness crisis that appears to be emerging within the U.S. naval aviation community. So your article was in particular about the F-18 and some of the issues that they've been having with keeping aircraft ready to go on the front line. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there are two versions of the F-18 out there. There's the classic version, which is the original one. One is the Super Hornet, the other is the Classic Hornet. So the Classic Hornet was built in the late 70s and mostly in the early 80s, and there's four versions of that. Mostly with the Marine Corps these days, the Navy has 5 squadrons left, and then those are getting old, really old. And then there's the Super Hornet, which is they started building those the late 1990s, and it's been upgraded over time, but that's the bulk of the Navy fleet these days. The problem is, originally the Legacy Hornets were supposed to be replaced by the F-35. The F-35 is late, and the Navy basically had to draw upon its reserve attrition fleet of Super Hornets to basically fill out some of those squadrons. They also had to try to extend the life of these original Hornets, and it just basically has turned into a gigantic problem because there's not enough planes being refurbished, and they're flying a lot longer than anyone ever expected. So it's just 6,000 hours, they're all flying 9,000 hours, and they're trying to extend and they have to do a lot of work to extend the life of those airframes. There's not enough workers. A lot of the sequestration impact was that they laid off a lot of workers. They had to retrain those people, they had to recertify those people. There's simply no one's ever flown a Hornet for this long. So it became this massive bow wave of problems, and there's just not enough planes out there for the Navy to fly. So only one out of 4 F-18s is fully mission capable. And not that they can't fly, but fully mission capable, which is ready to go to war. And they have 4 wings out there, carrier wings, and the rest of them are not ready for war.
So, and tell me a little bit about these other 3 out of 4 aircraft are not in this ready for war condition. So what's going on with them?
So any given moment, the Navy uses what they call a tiered readiness system. Some aircraft are deployed fully ready for war, and those are the deployed air wings. They always get priority. Usually when a unit comes home from deployment, their readiness level goes down, but not to this level usually. There's always some units spinning up. Some of the aircraft, they go into what they call depot maintenance. There's usually a pipeline of aircraft that need, you need like a certain number of reserve airplanes in the back in order to service the aircraft that are out in the front. So right now, they don't have enough planes to fill all these various needs. So the frontline squadrons have enough planes, but the squadrons are training don't, and a lot of planes are in maintenance and or being refurbished. So they don't have enough planes to basically fill the spots they have open.
And you were also telling me how they're having a reduced capacity to surge new squadrons out in the event of some sort of crisis. They've got, I think, 4 on the front lines that are ready to go. And then normally they would have other squadrons that they could spin up in about 90 days, but right now that's not the case.
Yeah, so essentially right now, to get those 4 air wings out front, they've basically taken everything they've had put up front. There's nothing left to draw on. Usually there's some level of personnel and aircraft that are ready to go, almost ready to go, not fully ready to go, but usually they can be brought up to speed in about 90 days. That's how it used to be. It's just over the last 15 years, there's been such a demand in the Navy to generate airplanes, and there's like a huge demand for carriers and their air wings, and there's just not enough people out there, and there's not enough money out there to keep these guys going. Bottom line is they need more pilots, maintainers, and mostly they need more airplanes. They're burning through airplane life every day at a very rapid clip, much faster than anyone ever expected because of these wars.
And so, how is the other side of this equation? You have the extended life of the Hornets on the one side, the increased operational costs. On the other side, we've got the F-35, which isn't ready yet to be rolled out by the Navy. How is that delay in rolling out the F-35 impacting on this readiness crisis?
So the Hornets were not originally, the original Hornets were not supposed to fly this long. The F-35 is late, very late. If I recall correctly, the Marine Corps version was supposed to originally be ready in 2010. They only got to being partially ready last year. And when they say ready, it's, they call it IOC, but these things are just barely operational in the most generous of terms. I mean, under most circumstances, they would not be considered operational, and if you actually try to get the Marine Corps to deploy these things, they would probably come up with some excuse to send almost anyone else. However, they need airplanes really badly. Their Marine Corps particularly is entirely based on using older model F-18s. Their airplanes are in bad shape, really bad shape, and they need planes right now. So the F-35 for them, it's actually working out very well. It means basically increase production and keep those airplanes coming up the front lines. The Navy is also impacted. They were basically told to take the F-35C, which is the carrier version of this aircraft. They're not particularly keen on it because it's a single engine aircraft, but it's an airplane they were told to get, so they're getting it. They were supposed to replace their older model Hornets. They were supposed to also have replaced those aircraft starting a couple years ago. That didn't happen. Now the Navy wants to get them in 2019. So the first operational squadron is supposed to be good to go, what they call IOC, with the final version of the original software. That probably, there's a chance that might happen, but there's a delay, and during that delay, the Navy needed to replace their older model jets. And what they did is they took what they call a nutrition reserve, which is a number of backup airplanes that in case you lose airplanes, you keep those as spares. They basically surged those to frontline squadrons, so now they don't have a backup inventory that they can draw upon if there's a crash or whatever. So they took 10 squadrons worth of planes and put them onto their front lines, converting squadrons. So now there's a shortage of planes. They're basically burning through their inventory of airplanes they had as spares. And this is the problem, is there's just not enough Hornets out there.
And on the other side, one of the proposals that they've got in order to resolve some of these challenges, as I understand it, is that they're going to take a wing down to 0 hours,
Yeah.
0 flying hours.
Yeah. So about 4 months, there's a proposal out there now. Carrier Wing 1 is going to be drawn down to no flying hours whatsoever for about 4 months. It's not a squadron that it wasn't an air wing that was going to deploy anytime soon. It's 2019, if I recall correctly, that they were going to deploy. They assumed because they're at the lowest tier of the readiness, they decided to stand that down completely. However, for the pilots who are at that unit, the maintainers are no longer maintaining airplanes. The pilots are not flying, so basically this destroys their proficiency completely. And also, not only does it impact their qualifications, it has knock-on impacts on their careers and just their overall skill levels. And also the Navy writ large, because this is going to have knock-on impacts when those people move on to other assignments. You now have a bunch of people who are not qualified to do their jobs. There's no other way of describing it other than it's a complete disaster.
And so you write at the end of your article about how there are crises like this in other sectors of the Navy, including submarines and surface warfare. That's correct?
Yeah, no, this is, they're essentially cannibalizing warships and submarines trying to get parts, because there's not enough parts in the inventory, that they're not going to be delivered on time, and they're basically stripping parts from existing warships and putting on their ships that need to go out now. This also includes personnel. They're basically raiding the equipments that are at home in order to keep the ones that are going out operational. So for the guys who are, supposed to be back training, they don't have fully operational warships, they don't have the right equipment, sometimes you can't train properly. So a lot of this have to do with sequestration because, for example, for submarines, you need trained workers to work on these things, and if you lay them off for like 4 months or so, what happened during sequestration, then you have to get them back in, you have to recertify them. You're dealing with some very, very, very sensitive, very difficult work on equipment. People have to be certified to do these things, and so you have to retrain them and recertify them, and sometimes you just can't do that. The backlog builds up. There's a couple of ships that, during the congressional testimony, the Albany, U.S. Albany is a nuclear attack submarine. It was cited as basically never having left its shipyard because they just couldn't get it fixed properly with the impact of this, of the workers and whatnot being unable to work on the thing properly.
How much of this is a bit of bureaucratic politics, though? Because throughout the post-sequester era, we've seen different branches, which are really competing more than ever for resources, talking about these kind of disaster or doomsday proposals that they have in order to retain what minimal readiness they have. And it certainly seems like there's at least a little bit of theater going on here, where they're saying if we don't get more money, Congress, we're going to have this massive crisis. And so is some of this a bit of bureaucratic maneuvering?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Basically, the Defense Department and contractors count on Congress's largesse to fund programs that otherwise they wouldn't have to budget for. This is the same reason we have LOCO fund. It's basically you need to pay for certain things. You may not be able to make it look pretty when you present your budget to Congress, and then you count on the fear within that committee to basically add money to your programs. Essentially over here, they shortchange their operations and maintenance accounts, and they're basically praying that Congress will add the money back. This happens every year. The Navy needs F-18s. They basically, for the last couple of years, hadn't, for example, paid for any of them. They're counting on Congress to add jets into the pipeline, which they did. No Congress person is going to vote for a program to eliminate jobs in their district. They know that very, very well. They're counting on it.
Well, this has been very enlightening and certainly more than a bit disturbing. So, again, this was Dave Majumdar in our inaugural TNI Live broadcast. He was talking about an article called U.S. Naval Aviation's Readiness Crisis, which you can find on nationalinterest.org, and we will be covering this issue in the coming months. Signing off.